Out of the 10 commandments, 9 of them are repeated in the New Testament. The only one that isn't is keep holy the Sabbath. Why? Because what did the Sabbath represent? It represented rest. And who is our rest?
Jesus.
Jesus is our rest. Okay. So the Sabbath command does not apply anymore.
First, I want to jump to what he's saying about 9 out of the 10 are repeated. Well, you know what else is not repeated in the New Testament? Don't rape. Is that allowed? Exodus 21:16, don't kidnap a person and you cannot sell them. Is that okay now? This is a jump in logic because it's not repeated. It's a continuation of the book. It's one book. You can't read the end and think you know everything. That's like reading Return of the King for Lord of the Rings and not knowing anything about Fellowship of the Ring or the Two Towers. It's one testament. It's one testimony of one. Him, Yah, the Most High, His Son, who is Him in the flesh, His form on earth. Things don't change. He doesn't change. The Sabbath doesn't change.
In fact, Paul even says in Colossians chapter 2, don't let anyone tell you have to obey any Sabbath or festival day. Now, we're not saying it's not a good idea to take a day off. We're not saying that. Yeah. We're saying, however, the Sabbath, the official Sabbath from the Old Testament, is not binding on Christians because that's Old Covenant.
In regards to the context of Colossians, it's being written to the people of Kolos, who are not majority Jews. In fact, there's not many Jews there. And it's near Laodicea, and they are mostly pagan converts. So when the text says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of any holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of the things to come, but the body is of Messiah. What it's actually saying to the people of Kolos here, to the Colossians, they are new converts that are being ridiculed by their pagan neighbors for their new beliefs, which they are keeping. They're keeping the Sabbath days, the new moon, the holy days, the drink and the meat of their faith. Do you not see the implication that they're actually doing the Sabbath? They're keeping that. Don't let someone judge you for doing that. It's kind of silly to not know that.
However, the Sabbath, the official Sabbath from the Old Testament, is not binding on Christians because that's Old Covenant.
On the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, I just want to highlight what it says in Jeremiah 31:31 and Hebrews, which he's about to quote, 8:10. First, we'll start with Hebrews 31, and I'll read back a little bit. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. I will not be like the covenant I made with their fathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. But the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord, I will put my law in their minds and inscribe it on their hearts. If you hit cross-reference on Bible Hub on Jeremiah 31:33, you'll see it right there, Hebrews. For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my laws in their minds and inscribe it on their hearts. That is to say what it says in Galatians 3:17. What I mean is this: the law that came 430 years later does not revoke the covenant previously established by God, so to nullify the promise, because it was always a promise, but it doesn't nullify the law either, and the next new covenant cannot nullify it. It's about the law, the first covenant. It's about that as well.
On Christians because that's Old Covenant, and as the writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews 8:13, the Old Covenant is obsolete. It no longer has binding power on anybody who's a Christian.
But isn't it?
In regards to Hebrews 8:13, the word covenant does not actually appear in the Greek. You can go to Hebrews 8:13, you can hit Greek, you'll go down, you'll see in brackets is covenant. You could go to Hebrews 7, and the word covenant is also in brackets. And in verse 6, the word old is in brackets. That's because those words don't actually appear there in the Greek, and someone is adding to it. And translations like Berean, Literal Standard Bible, the Berean Standard Bible, scholars like R.L. Watson have posited the plain reading without those words will suggest that it's comparing ministries. It's comparing the Levitical priesthood and Yahushua, Jesus Christ's priesthood. So why is his priesthood better? For a better covenant, this covenant would be written on our hearts, the law. And why would there need to be a new priesthood? Because perfection couldn't be gotten through the Levitical priesthood. Hebrews 7:11. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, and indeed the law given to the people and established that priesthood, why was there still need for another priest to come? One in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron.
Said to be remembered. Didn't God say remember the Sabbath and not to any of the other 9 of the 10 commandments?
Well, he said remember the Sabbath to Israel, but that's Old Covenant.
Exactly, it's given to Israelites. And just as Romans say in 11:11 to 31, Gentiles are grafted into the root, the root that is Israel. Jews who are converted like Peter and Paul are natural branches that bore fruit. But as both Israelites, that is Gentiles and Jews, they're still supposed to keep the law. As we discussed earlier, Hebrews is actually talking and comparing the Leviticus to the Melchizedek priesthood of Jesus Christ. The human Levitical priesthood was never intended to be perfect. It is Yahushua, Jesus Christ's priesthood through Melchizedek that is perfect and is the fulfillment of the promise. So in Hebrews 7:12, when it says there's a change in the law, if there's a change in the priesthood, it's a different priesthood. It's a different law. It's like comparing basketball to football. The Levitical priesthood is human. The Melchizedek order is something separate. And that's what Hebrews is talking about. And the author of Hebrews presupposes that the law is still valid and appeals to it. He quotes Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is talking about the Torah. And the law is ministered by a new priest.
Well, then wouldn't that also apply to it being taken out then?
What do you mean taken out? It's not changed to Sunday. The reason they were meeting on Sunday was not to adhere to the Sabbath. They were meeting on Sunday because that's the day he rose. They're just commemorating the day he rose.
This is true. The Sabbath isn't changed. However, if it's not celebrated on Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, then it has changed. And if you say you don't have to follow it, that's also changing it. You don't have to observe it. We are supposed to walk as Messiah did. And Messiah kept Sabbath. Luke 4:16. Let's go to the Berean. Then Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. As was his custom, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath, and he stood up to read. If we go to Acts 17:2, we see Paul also kept the Sabbath. We'll go down to the Berean. As was his custom, Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbaths he reasoned with them from the scriptures. I'm not arguing that we go to synagogue. I'm arguing that Yahshua, Jesus, and Paul observed the Sabbath. And he's observing it in Acts 17, a long time after he's died, risen, and ascended. It's not until the 4th century where Constantine makes a decree and declares the Sabbath is now on Sunday. And for some reason, Protestants still do it.
They were meeting on Sunday was not to adhere to the Sabbath. They were meeting on Sunday because that's the day he rose. They're just commemorating the day he rose.
So again, that is correct. The apostles didn't change the Sabbath. The apostles met and celebrated on the first day. The apostles celebrated and immersed themselves in the words every day. They observed the Sabbath on the Sabbath. So to recap, Hebrews talking about Yahshua's priesthood making the Levitical priesthood obsolete, which is worn out. In fact, it's the same word, paleo, in Greek, and it's the same word in Hebrews 1:11, which is talking about a worn out piece of fabric, piece of clothing. So in this meaning, obsolete means wearing out, no longer able to function as originally intended. This is theologically different from abolishing. It's just no longer able to be physically done. But by God's grace, we have Yahushua ministering in the heavenly tabernacle for us. And as Dr. Turek said, it was given to the Israelites. The Old Covenant, the CovenantAtSinai, the Mosaic Covenant. That covenant was cut with Israel, who are to be his nation, and now we are in that nation, grafted in. The author of Hebrews' point is that Jesus is now our high priest. We should still keep the law.